My therapist suggested that I write out my narrative because she believed I was holding too much anger inside and not expressing it in a way that would help me overcome the betrayal. Because I refuse to recognize my guilt, I continue to seek answers that I cannot find. As a result, my life is in limbo, waiting for me to take the next step. She feels that by looking at what happened from a different perspective and expressing my feelings about it, I will be able to restore my true self. I don't know who he is, she says. That is my problem. My name is Robert Benson. As of this writing, I am 34 years old. I was a middle manager for an engineering firm that designed and built machinery for customers. I knew I wouldn't be able to develop any farther because it was a family firm and I wasn't a member. The incidents I'll describe indicate that my job at the firm became untenable. I've been told I'm one of the decent guys. I have a good sense of humor. Or at least I used to. I work hard, provide well, and care about others. I assist when needed and take my duties, such as marriage, seriously. It appears I was the only one. Let me clarify. Throughout high school, I consistently fared somewhat above average. I wasn't a genius, but with hard study, I performed well on my tests. I got into a couple fights when I was pushed too hard, but after they were ended, the feuds dissipated. I have several close male friends who have always been there for me and encouraged me. I wasn't an Adonis, so ladies didn't gravitate toward me, but those I met liked me. I was raised to treat others well, particularly women. I took no for an answer and explained that I dropped out of high school and began working for the corporation as a day-release apprentice at a community college while studying engineering. I've always enjoyed building stuff. Duplo came first, followed by Lego and Meccano. Machines are now designed using computers. My friends claim I enjoy my toys because I am constantly hunting for new devices. I wore a built-in camera that resembled a badge. It was intended to capture what I thought was a fantastic evening that I would want to remember later when everything went south. I'm pleased I did it since it proved to be quite valuable later on, but I'm getting ahead of myself as I near the end of my first year of college. We had a big celebration to celebrate being free for a few months. My friend Bill admired a girl in the nursing group who used college and local hospital facilities. He persuaded me to attend the party in order to pique the interest of her girlfriends, as if nursing students would look up to me as an engineer rather than doctors. I appeared to be of regular height. My employment has helped me become muscular and fit. I went to hear live music. Stephanie, Bill's friend, introduced us to the other girls. I was courteous enough to compliment them all. This was correct because they were all attractive. I was shocked when one of women, Carol, began talking to me. We drank and danced and her legs endured. I'm not the best synchronized dancer. She appeared to enjoy my company, even laughing at my outrageous jokes. Carol was around 5 feet and 5 inches tall with a slim body. I was astonished when, at the conclusion of the evening, she asked to meet with me again. I agreed. I'm no idiot. Well, what transpired proved I was an idiot. But then we started courting, and soon I was experiencing emotions that I had only felt once before. I had some girls I really liked, but Carol took my breath away every time I saw her. I missed her whenever we weren't together. My parents laughed at me, but not brutally. They noticed how happy she made me. I even studied harder to show her that one day I could be someone she respected. Love, perhaps. We often talked about our future. She wanted to be a registered nurse, but believed she couldn't have children to do so. I informed her that I adore children and that having kids would not jeopardize her profession, but would instead benefit it because she would have more experience to contribute to improve her talents. We spent ages on this, but it was a sure thing for her. I chatted to my parents, who recommended me to follow my heart's desires. My mother adored Carol, as if she were the daughter she never had. My brother Dan had one child and was expecting another, so they had grandchildren. Carol was close to her sister Carrie, and after finishing her night shifts, she had 5 to 7 days free 2 or 3 times every year. She would visit Carrie's house. It was 2 hours away. She used to say, "I was working so hard that I wouldn't miss her." That was not true. I do miss her. I agreed to her ultimatum of no family, and we were married approximately 3 years after meeting. On June 16, 29, Bill was my best man while Stephanie served as my lead bridesmaid. They were no longer a pair since Stephanie wanted to marry a doctor. Bill enjoyed teasing her about leaving him. While they were dating, I would have agreed with him. Carol looked stunning coming down the aisle in an ivory satin gown. She grinned at me the entire way down the aisle. I did my best to keep eye contact. Our guests must have thought I was being goofy because I had a smirk on my face. Carol finally moved into my home. She refused until we got married. When I first earned enough money for a mortgage, I bought it cheaply from my grandparents. It required a lot of effort, but I'm adept with my hands. By the time we married, I had finished most of the major tasks. There were still some things that needed to be updated. Another quarrel erupted over our marriage, our financial account. Carol wanted to have her own account so she wouldn't have to rely on me to spend money on whatever she wanted. I was to keep mine, and we would form a joint account and deposit money in proportion to our earnings for bills, vacations, and so on. I also lost that discussion. For the first few years, everything went well, if not perfectly. The nursing class held reunions, and I was able to attend most of them. I missed a few of them while on a business trip. Honestly, I felt like a spare tire. I was tolerated and regarded almost as a clown. Stephanie was always there for me because she was Carol's best friend. Carol tried to spend the majority of her time with me, but she danced with a few doctors. But I saw nothing wrong with the dances. I became friends with several husbands because we shared a common passion in golf. I managed to reduce my handicap to 6 and was persuaded to compete against them. We occasionally traveled for golf breaks. Some of them occurred during reunions or when Carol teed off in the nights. She kept going to her sister's house, which irritated me. Carol rarely discussed her work or objectives. She appeared content with her routine as a nurse. When I inquired, she stated that she did not want the responsibility or lack of interaction with patients if she was promoted. Carol and I structured our social lives primarily around her friends. I still went out with Bill and others, but usually to a nearby club for drinks. Carol sometimes attended the parties. She was always excited to hang out with us. Non-medical staff were generally allowed to work shifts with her, which included food, dancing, and cabs. We would spend time wandering in the hills and visiting Glasgow or Edinburgh for weekends and plays. We went on vacation to destinations with lovely beaches and intriguing attractions nearby. Carol's bikinis were, unsurprisingly, conservative. I offered her more revealing ones, but she declined. She never considered traveling to a beach where no clothing was permitted. We rarely argued unless one of us didn't want something or if the other objected. We discussed it. In certain circumstances, I won. In a few situations, she won. It never interfered with our private life. He or she may be extremely loud, dress excessively, or engage in role play. There was nothing forbidden to try. Some we liked, while others were less appealing. Every day I loved her more. Our 10th anniversary was approaching, and I wanted to plan something special. I talked to Stephanie about booking a hotel, going out to dinner, and dancing. She was agreeable. She pledged she would keep her knowledge of the situation a secret. The other couple had stated the same thing. I knew I had to tell her about it, but it was closer to the event, or she'd like to add more. When I told Carol a few days ago, she was overjoyed, and I barely made it out of bed in the morning. She contacted Stephanie, and before I knew it, the 4 of us had arrived at the motel. We dropped our belongings for the night. We headed downstairs to join the others. The girls' chat seemed highly emotional. Stephanie was completely captivated with Carol, who was fully aware of all of Stephanie's plans. Brian and I were talking about an upcoming golf competition. We had planned to enter. We had to defend it. Mark and Grant were playing for fun, claiming that their job as DRS is stressful enough without adding competition. Then we went to the hotel's nightclub. We located a table at the rear, near the bar and main lobby, mostly away from the primary speakers. We were able to chat, rest between dances, and enjoy the evening. Carol made it clear to everyone that she was only dancing with me. We spent the majority of the following 90 minutes on the dance floor. We paused for a drink. I want water, she wants wine, and so on. Several times when we were dancing, some man patted my shoulder. When I glanced back, Carol had melted into his arms. I didn't even have time to say, "Get off." I was shocked. She was quite happy. I'd never seen her stare at him like this. He maintained control while they danced. I walked back to our table, shocked. Stephanie spoke up, and her excitement was obvious. "Robert, it's great that you let Carol dance with your first love. She asked him to your wedding so he might claim her. However, he never showed up." I gazed at her. She smiled, but her expression conveyed complete scorn for me. That's not all there was to it. I was infuriated. I exploded. What's going on? The others lowered their gaze. Nobody but Stephanie could look at me. I shouted, "This has completely destroyed my evening. She only danced with me tonight. Stephanie, you screwed me over. You instructed her to allow enough time to put everything up. You both knew about that jerk. What else had she planned?" The others couldn't believe how angry I was. I was still staring at Stephanie, waiting for a response, when Carol approached and tugged on my arm. She had clearly heard me. Many others heard me and looked in our direction. She had a solemn expression on her face. I knew she was going to say something I wouldn't like. To say my evening had gone from poor to bloody terrible is an understatement. Carol spoke aggressively. "Robert, the man I danced with is Bruce Benning. He's my first and only love." I gave a gasp. Carol continued. "He and I had dated before I met you. We met numerous times each year. He was training to be a pediatric neurosurgeon, so we couldn't spend time together. He was glad I found you. You are such a lovely guy, and an honest, nice man. I enjoyed spending time with you, but I always loved Bruce. He's the reason I can't have your kids. You would have been deeply hurt if I had left you and taken them with me. Bruce is now the head of the Leeds Hospital's neurosurgery department. I'm traveling with him. I'm sorry you are in so much pain, but while we were together, I gave myself completely to you, so you would never know I loved anyone else. If Bruce hadn't come back for me, I would have been content to be your wife forever." I take deep breaths. My vision was blurry. My head was splitting. My heartbeat was racing. I was looking at someone I believed loved me. I involuntarily vomited so much for a lovely dinner. Stephanie smiled as the others watched her. That jerk Benning was walking towards us. I screamed at Carol, "You evil, lying, deceitful jerk cheater, give me your wedding and engagement rings or I'll rip off your finger and take them." My outburst shocked the rest of the group. It was so unusual, but the events that unfolded in front of me were also incredible. Benning stepped forward. I turned to him and said, "Stay away or you'll never be able to use your hands again." Loser. He paused, surprised by my threat, and looked around for support. "You entertained my wife and demanded that she humiliate me, and these so-called friends are ecstatic for both of you. I unleashed my rage on the others. You are all low-life sewer dwellers, for crying out loud. How many of you have fun with others? How many marriages do you want to see end in front of your eyes for the sake of entertainment? The cheaters have greater integrity than any of you." I turned back to Carol. My rage is crystal clear. I screamed, "Jerk with rings." My temporal arteries were clearly visible. I glared at her in rage. I'd never felt so angry. I wanted to wring her neck until she snapped. I could see the fear on her face as she saw the stranger. She knew she was in danger. She removed her rings. She cried. But forget about her. I grabbed them and stormed into the room. I gathered my bag, looked around, and saw the clothes without thinking twice. I threw it away and urinated on it. I showed the receptionist my key card and informed her that the cheater would pay the bill. Looking back, I'm embarrassed that I never apologized for throwing up on the lobby floor. At least it wasn't on the carpet. I doubt I'll be back. I drove home. My thoughts were disorganized. I can't remember how I got there. I relaxed once I arrived home. I'm not sure how I couldn't calm down, but I felt compelled to act. I went to the garage and turned off the automatic door as it might have a key fob. I grabbed a box of trash bags and went to our bedroom. I gathered her belongings from the closets and placed them in a pile. I pulled out the drawers and emptied them into the bags. There were 2 keys taped to the underside of one drawer, one for the vault and one for the safety deposit box. I rummaged through her jewelry box, took out all of the jewelry I'd given my wife, and tossed the box into the bags. I went through our file cabinet and shook out all of her paperwork. I discovered her password book and scanned it. The cabinet contained no information about her or Benning. It was nearly 2 in the morning. There was no way my brain could relax. My heart continued to pound, but not as hard as it had before entering the warehouse. I looked online to find out which one, as there were 3 in the city. All have 24-hour access. I found the one I needed because they obligingly displayed the key on the homepage. I wore latex gloves to prevent my fingerprints from being detected. What I discovered caused me great pain. I thought I knew I was in pain, but it wasn't true. It ripped my soul from me and tore it into pieces. I returned to my car and used the camera I have at work to photograph the entire contents. I wrote everything down. There were file boxes and 2 locked cabinets. I picked them out, one of the skills that engineers should have. I almost wish I had not. In one of them, I discovered Carol's plans. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Who the heck was she? Bunning's files were stored in another cabinet. They confirmed my impression that he was a thoroughly depraved, heartless jerk and narcissist. He only loved himself. I had to return to the car to get a battery for my phone because my camera was out of battery. I double-checked to make sure I had taken all of the photos, and it was already 7 a.m. when I finished. I locked the closet so they wouldn't realize I was there. I went into the cafe and ate breakfast. I mentally went over everything I had discovered. Carol's parents insisted on a prenup to keep their daughter safe from what I discovered. Carol was not about to sign a prenup and take 10%. No doubt under the direction of that loser Benning. She wanted to not only kill me, but also destroy me forever. Although I wanted to confront her, I realized I couldn't tell her. I knew what her plans were. The cursive flyer song came to mind. When I got home, I replaced my keys so she wouldn't assume I knew about them and their contents. I stopped by the hardware store and purchased new locks for my home. Carol did not have the keys in her purse, but I was not about to take any chances. My next stop was the bank, where I looked into a strange safe deposit box that I knew nothing about. It consists of several bonds and her name only. I photographed them again. I am becoming increasingly curious. Where did she get the money for them? Was she an escort on the side? Who the heck was she? Carol texted me right after I got home saying she wanted to stop by and pick up her car. I responded, "Your car?" "The car in question is leased in my name and I am making the payments. Because your salary is so meager, I'm going to take a vacation and use it until the lease expires in 8 weeks. Your clothing and belongings are already in trash bags. If you don't need them, I'll put them in the fireplace to burn. I'm going to stuff your wedding dress with straw so it looks like you're burning it. The door locks and alarm codes were changed. Do not bring that jerk in. He will not like what I am going to do to him." A few minutes later, her sister called and hurled insults at me. I ended the call and blocked her number. I didn't intend to burn her wedding dress, but the reaction confirmed her feelings. A picture of her wearing it to marry Benning flashed through my mind. Screw it. I took it to the fireplace and started it on fire. It had been lovely, just like my marriage. But now both had been reduced to ashes. Carol arrived an hour later, accompanied by Stephanie and Brian. Brian asked quietly, "Robert, how are you?" I laughed like Caesar when his friend stabbed him in the back. I looked at everyone and yelled, "What the heck do you think? I'm furious at all of you for covering for her without having the decency to tell me what you clearly knew. Most of all, I'm mad at myself for falling for that darn cheater." Carol got annoyed when I called her a fool. She seemed to think I should be normal with her. "Robert, I understand you're hurting, but this is so unlike you. You ruined the clothes I was planning to wear for Bruce. There was no reason for that. I'll get my stuff. When I do, I will leave you alone. I know I've harmed you. But I've always only loved Bruce. You'll be happier with someone who loves you and has children. You are a very special person, and I truly enjoyed our time together. If I had never met Bruce, I would have been so happy with you. Can I get my wedding ring back? It'll be a lovely reminder of all the good we've accomplished together." I screamed, "Oh, no way. It's been passed down in my family for generations. Mom loved how well it fit you. We were made for one another. I have yet to tell them what a deceitful fool you are." Carol flinched at the severity of my words. Brian and Stephanie helped her load her bags into the car. Carol asked about the wedding dress. I advised her to check the fire pit when she saw the ashes. She cried. Stephanie called me a jerk. I corrected her. "You've had her back all these years. She won't be able to wear it if she marries that darn loser. It's the ashes of my marriage, my life. Who the heck do you think you are? Jerk?" Brian, though shocked by my outburst, didn't defend her. He was the only one who looked embarrassed about last night when Carol came to her senses. She asked if she could check to see if I had missed anything. I said yes while she was doing that. I told Brian that we wouldn't be defending any more titles. He nodded. A few minutes later, Carol came downstairs. She said softly, "Robert, I'm sorry, but I've always loved Bruce. When you divorce me, you'll find someone who will love you the way you give love. You'll have the family you want so badly. This hurts both of us. I really care about you, and I'm sorry I hurt you, but it's for the best." They left and I went into the house as I expected. She needed the 2 hidden keys. I was so tired. I went to bed. I fell asleep with my head barely touching the pillow. I was awakened by my mother's call. Before I could say a word, she started. "Robert, I never thought you would raise your hand against a woman." But Carol showed us pictures of her wounds. She explained why she left you, why I was angry and didn't hold back. "Mom, you've been lied to. Just like I've been lied to for the last 13 years. She's been having fun with that jerk the whole time she's been with me. She's setting me up to keep everything rather than lose it. I don't know who the heck she's become. And did I ever even know her? I've never raised my hand to any woman. You and my father taught me that. Have you ever heard anyone suggest that I've ever raised my hand to a woman? Even last night when I wanted so badly to wring her neck, I didn't. You can believe her, or you can believe me. But the truth will come out if you take her side. You'll lose me forever." I ended the conversation. The battle lines were set and the conflict had begun. I went to fetch dinner and returned to the house. I had the information. Now I needed to get organized. As they say in crime shows, follow the money. So I did just that. First, I examined our joint account. What I discovered was interesting, very fascinating. I was delighted I had copied Carol's password book as it proved essential in the evening and on Sunday. I spent the rest of the evening and Sunday attempting to make sense of everything along the route. I updated all my passwords. I learned that I had been played a heck of a trick every time she came to visit her sister. I left for a competition or vacation with my so-called pals. She was a horrible loser. I was very upset, especially with myself for being so foolish. Why didn't I notice what was going on? Did not recognize her visits for what they were? Why didn't you suspect a single incident? What exactly was wrong with me? How could she have done this to me? Monday morning, I arrived at the workplace early. I wanted to check on my annual leave and credit hours. Sandra from Human Resources always arrived early. She noticed that I was out of sorts. We dated in high school and grew quite close. She ended their connection. She is still single. I had rarely heard that she was dating. She questioned Robert. "What's wrong? I've never seen you this sad." I smiled an empty smile. My world exploded. Friday was our anniversary. This was meant to be a romantic evening. She planned it so that her lover would take her away from me in front of everyone. I discovered that she dated and partied with him when she had 5 to 7 free days following evenings out. 2, 3 times per year. I squandered 13 years with a cheat who loved someone else. She now claims that I controlled her, to accuse me of being an outright cheater. She wants to totally destroy me. I will never place my hands on a woman. I need time to decide what to do, to consult. Sandra was shocked. She came over to hug me. "Robert, I know you'd never strike a woman. Since our breakup, I've detested myself for being weak. You are such a respectable, good, and kind man. I will stand by your side regardless of what others say. Here is my phone number and email address. Call me if you need assistance or simply want to talk. There are many other ladies you've been kind to, and they will never accept this fool's falsehoods." I was just returning to my desk when my boss summoned me in. He was unhappy yesterday. Carol had arrived at his residence carrying photos of me abusing her. I was infuriated. "Mr. Deckard, you have known me for years, and you still believe a deceitful cheater. You can fire me, or I can go immediately. I'm doing 9.5 weeks, so that's my notice time. When the truth is out, do not expect me to return to teach your children how to do the job. They may do whatever they want with this firm as far as I'm concerned." I went outside. I printed off the "I'm quitting" letter, signed it, and placed it in my internal mail. The glances I received as I exited the workplace indicated that many people were startled that I could be so angry. I spent the remainder of the morning figuring out what I needed to do. Carol had stayed at a hotel 3 hours away from home multiple times in the previous 18 months, according to her financial records. This occurred while she was visiting her lying. "But sister, it must be genetic." I packed my suitcases and started the road. I have to add that the car was a delight to drive. Perhaps the fact that Carol was so irritated that I didn't give it to her added to the enjoyment. I pulled into the hotel's parking lot. I doubted they'd give me what I asked for. However, what goes around does come around. I dumped my suitcase inside my room and returned to the front desk. I asked for the manager. The receptionist believed there was a problem with the room, but I told her that everything was fine. I merely have a request for the manager. The manager approached, and I explained what I required, if that was even feasible. He was convinced that without a court order they could not assist me. I was expecting that. I explained that the loser she would be with was playing the same game as a woman from this town, and she was planning with me. The secretary perked her ears. When the manager departed, she talked quietly. "I know the couple you want to videotape. They have come here several times. He is an egotistical jerk. I am an old friend of the woman you mentioned. He stalks her aggressively, compelling her to sell everything for his money. I may contact the lawyer who represented her for you. She's really good. Even the sheriff trusted her. But he won because of the photographs he displayed. She will obtain you a court order." I nodded. "Thanks. I'm happy to assist your pal. If she had simply walked away with a prenup, I probably would not have done anything. But they intend to wreck my life. They chose the wrong person to meddle with." I was seated in my office 15 minutes later, chatting to Heather Morrison, a strong woman who didn't hesitate to use profanity. I stated my predicament and what I had discovered. When I finished, she said emphatically, "Do you have that information on hand?" I nodded. "I have it on both my phone and camera. It's more structured and easier to track on my hotel laptop once I discovered it." She seemed quite happy. "If you can arrive tomorrow morning at 7:30, we can go over everything before heading to the courthouse at 8 a.m. I believe I can persuade the sheriff to issue us a warrant for the videotapes at the hotel." I nodded. Hopefully, given what I've seen, he frequents this group of hotels. There were 3 other women he duped with the fraud. I'm not sure Carol understands how invested she is, but I'm going to fight her as hard as I can. I'll have to hire a lawyer in my town. Heather smiled. "I'll be your lawyer if you want, and that loser will crap his pants when he sees me. He will know he is in for a tough time. Too awful. I warned him I would find out the truth and ruin his life. He realized I meant it. I will." I laughed for the first time since Friday night. I believed her. I had not lost faith in others, as I had previously believed. When I got into the office the following morning, I was astonished to find another man in the office. Heather introduced him as Jim. He was the father of Betsy, the woman Benning had screwed. He was also the private investigator tasked with finding the remaining parts of the puzzle. I gave Heather an SD card with all of the information on it. I highlighted the documents related to Betsy. Jim fell back in his chair, letting out a loud cry. He spoke aggressively. I realized the greatest thing I could do was make that jerk disappear. I had to do it. It would be a better world without him. Heather and I headed to the courthouse. Jim took on the challenge of finding the other 3 women. Benning had screwed up. Heather would pursue Samantha Wiseman, the lady who, according to these documents, possessed the definitive proof of my innocence and the innocence of all the victims. The question was whether she was involved or deceived by it. Within the court's office, Heather just informed the female clerk of the purpose for her visit. I thought we were meant to meet with the sheriff. Heather went into detail which struck me as unusual. Shouldn't she have spoken to the sheriff about it? Not the clerk. After around 15 minutes, a gentleman seated in the rear of the office approached and chatted. "Janine, phone Betsy and tell her not to give that jerk more penny or sell her house. I'll sway the court in her favor. Heather, this is your warrant. It includes all of the hotels in the company. You may inform Marvin that if he stalls, I'll put him in jail." He walked away. I was shocked. Heather giggled at my expression. Sheriff Griffiths is a knowledgeable elderly guy. He believes that the truth is above the law. Let's head to the motel and cure Marvin. Marvin, the manager, wanted to talk to his superiors, but Heather scared him so much that he gave in. The chief of security was summoned and presented him with a warrant. I may be thorough, but I had every date Carol had set for her sister during our time together. We saw him enter dates and names. They were registered as Mr. and Mrs. Benning. Soon, we had a video of them dining together and entering their room. We discovered additional 26 reservations at various hotels in the group, but we couldn't uncover any recordings from almost 18 months ago. Heather was quite happy. I commented on a video that she liked. She made some notes, and the manager promised to process and deliver all of the documents and videos to her. Heather and I visited her office. She began, "Robert, I've thought about this. We need them to initiate the divorce proceedings. If you sue her for adultery, they will file charges and utilize these pictures. They'll chat after us. giving us less of an opportunity to catch their lies. You informed her that you were going on vacation. Take that time. Have them fill out the paperwork. They'll have to provide their evidence, which will be destroyed. Jim will retrace the other women's stories. We know Betsy's story. I'll utilize the video of you talking to take down this other guy for you. I'll track down Samantha and find out what her function is, and I'll have my staff handle all of the information and financial difficulties. I nodded. I need a break. I'm not sure how I feel, but I want to break it so much. I will be gone for several weeks, but then I'll have to look for work. If someone is willing to hire a wife abuser, even if the accusations are unfounded. I'm not a star soccer player. To be honest, finding that the guy was cheating on those women helped me. I wasn't the only one who was so easily duped, but uncovering the proof benefited both them and myself. I didn't feel as worthless. I didn't feel anything except grief, exhaustion, and of course, bloody angry rage. Whenever I recalled that night, I stayed here for a few more nights before departing while in Hamilton. I drove south to Staffordshire to ride roller coasters. They are undoubtedly a stress reliever. After returning, I headed north to explore the area north of Inverness. I rode the north coast 500 before moving to the northeast to ride the Grampian 250. I went on the Glenlivet Smugglers Tour and had a modern Glenlivet or two at one of the boutique shops deep in the Highlands. Despite living near both rangers, I had never been there. The scenery was stunning, so I disregarded the jerks. I was having fun exploring, but a part of me was still deeply hurt, and the emotion would not leave me. My rental car was coming to an end, so I headed home. I'm pulling into my driveway. I was surprised at how well the lawn and garden were maintained. I expected to see a savanna. Gordon, my neighbor, came out when he saw me. He smiled. The wanderer returns. "How is it going?" I laughed. "As good as it can be." "Is this your fault?" He laughed. "Sandra called looking for you. She was concerned about you. She told me briefly about your problem. I was shocked. I never imagined Carol was capable of such a thing. She and Sandra should have been actresses together. There are a few other women in me. You have cleaned up your garden. I am not sure everything survived. Some officials have been visiting you in recent days. Don't be surprised if someone knocks on your door." I thanked him. "I have some shopping to do when I return. Stop by my place for a few beers." I shook my head after being away for a few weeks. I called Sandra. We had spoken several times per week since then, but she never mentioned it. She made me talk about my feelings and listened quietly as I cried. I really should do something to thank her. Gordon and I were talking on the patio when the doorbell rang. I stepped outside and a court messenger handed me the divorce papers. He smirked. I smiled and told him that I hoped the sheriff hated liars in his court. I called Heather and she asked me to scan the documents and email them to her. She would handle all legal responses. She was delighted but refused to educate me. When I asked, she responded, "The less you know, the less you can unintentionally inform others." 7 weeks later, I waited in court for Heather's divorce hearing. Jim was with her. He appeared to be really delighted. He simply hugged me as I entered the courthouse. I sat beside Heather and Jim. Sandra, Josie, Michaela, Gordon, Bill, and a few other pals sat behind me, refusing to leave my side. My brother Dan contacted me several times and expressed his support. He was unable to make it due to work. He had a disagreement with our parents because they preferred Carol above me. I was not shocked to see her co-workers, Stephanie and Amy, following her. Ben stood next to Carol, smirking like a complete loser. He lost his cool when Heather and Jim walked in. I'm sure Jim had a strategy in case the court didn't deal with him. My folks were also there for her. I disregarded their eyes. Carol gazed at me, but I ignored her. Bill labeled her a powerfully dressed fool. His response was not silent. I imagined the stares he'd received from her and Stephanie. He really enjoyed winding up. Heidi, Steph, one of Carol's attorneys. Miss Johnston began the trial. She appeared to be full of confidence. My client wants to get into a prenuptial agreement that limits her to 10% of the value of their combined assets. She admits to having committed adultery, but only after suffering cruelty for nearly her whole life in her marriage to Robert Benson. She seeks a divorce based on spousal control, with the property divided by court order. She contends that the decision should be entered broadly in her favor. These documents show the marriage's assets at the moment of divorce. She gave a copy to Heather and the court clerk, who gave it to the sheriff. Heather could not stop laughing. The sheriff seemed astonished that they needed to exchange documents. Heather stood up. "My lord, Carol Benson's actions made mediation impossible. Until today, I am confident you will understand why once the proof is given, Miss Johnston and I had a brief chat about the evidence to be presented. She wishes, with the court's permission, to present all of the evidence against Mr. Benson before I re-examine the witnesses. I agree to that, as long as I obtain an oath from the court that allows me to scrutinize the witnesses. Without that, I'll ask them when they emerge." The sheriff pondered for a few minutes. "This is really unusual. I understand Miss Johnston's want to fully document your client's behaviors. I will agree to let you cross-examine the witnesses after Johnston finished her questioning." Heather resumed her opening speech. "My client wishes to have the prenuptial agreement fully enforced and to be considered for a reduction in the plaintiff's payment as a result of her intentional lies, which, in addition to attempting to avoid responsibility for her adulterous behavior, were intended to destroy his reputation, character, and future. She plotted her lie with the intention of ruining an honest, nice, caring man who is very different from her, and she lives with a pair of scheming, lying charlatans. We are collecting child support from Carol Benson because these lies cost Mr. Benson his job. These lies cost him numerous friendships and his relationship with his parents, who were extremely close. There was no spousal control, and we will demonstrate that." Heather sat up. She smiled. She was planning to do this. Carol took the stand. I felt her gaze on me, but I looked ahead, not at her. Carol's attorney informed her about how we met. Carol choked back tears as she described the early days of our marriage and how I had been abusive. Robert didn't like that I worked nights. I'm sure he assumed I was having fun with one of the physicians. Every night, his rage grew more until he began striking me in the face. I covered it up with makeup while at work. I would travel to my sister's place to allow the bruises to heal before returning to work for the day shift. He was all right until the next shift, when the circle would begin again. My sister urged me to leave him. She took photos because she stated I'd need them for the divorce. Her lawyer questioned, "Were you having an affair?" "Carol could have won the Academy Award for Best Actress any year," she snorted. "I'm embarrassed to say that I was. Bruce and I had known each other since he was a junior doctor at the hospital. I met him outside my sister's house one day. He noticed the bruises. He was very kind and supportive. I realized I had deep feelings for him. We made love a few times. He helped me feel whole, not a broken lady being harassed." The lawyer guided her through every encounter with Benning, including our anniversary dinner and the outcome. She wanted her wedding ring returned. I threatened to rip off her finger if she would not return it to me, and smashed Bruce's delicate surgeon's hands to pieces. My fury made her fearful. I would do this because to my previous brutality, I kept the jewels I gave her, but all she wanted was the engagement ring. Carol was upset when she recalled seeing her clothes in a bucket when she returned to our room to collect her belongings. She fell into tears as she described her stunning wedding gown in ashes. Her attorney sat with a pleased smile on his face. Her sister Carrie spoke next, followed by Stephanie and Benning. All of them provided solid evidence of my poor behavior, even though none of them were witnesses. Only the result. Carrie verified that she had taken the photos, which made Heather happy. It was late evening when Denning finished his presentation, and the judge extended the deadline till the next day. Sandra approached me as I was leaving the court and exclaimed, "I've never heard such a disgusting lie before." She hugged me, and so did the others. My parents just glared at me with daggers. They'd made their choice. The next morning, Heather summoned Carol to court. Heather was all business with no smiles. Each question was like a dart. Carol's maiden name is Miss Reese. "You mentioned that after your loving husband wounded you, you met Bruce Benning, who was interning at your hospital. Was he so attracted to you that he married you? Is the story true?" Carol flushed. "Yes." Heather hit play, and Carol and I's discussion from earlier that evening played. "You have been the best spouse anyone could ask for. I will only dance with you." Heather grinned as we arrived at our motel room. "Are those the statements of a controlling wife?" Carol responded. I attempted to convey that I cared, but his bullying turned me against him. Heather continued. "On your 10th wedding anniversary, you dressed for your lover while simultaneously expressing your love for your husband. You did everything a loving wife would do in a loving relationship. Didn't you? Carol stammered. I tried to appease him. Heather pushed the play button. There was no doubt about the action. There was no attempt to give me pleasure. Heather continued, amazing actress portraying the lovely wife, knowing you're ready to knife him in the back. Heather was firm. You and your longtime sweetheart have planned to disgrace Mr. Benson. Whose only fault was that? He adored a cheater. Heather pressed another button, which you could see clearly. Carol, please talk. Robert, the man I danced with is Bruce Benning. He is my first and only love. I gasped as she spoke. Carol added, he and I dated before I met you. He and I went out a couple times each year. He was training to be a pediatric neurosurgeon, so we couldn't spend time together. He was glad I discovered you. You are such a lovely guy, an honest and good man. I enjoyed spending time with you, but I've always loved Bruce. He's the reason I can't have your kids. You would have been deeply wounded if I had left you and taken them with me. Bruce is presently the head of the Leeds Hospital's neurosurgery department. I'm traveling with him. I'm sorry you are in so much agony. But when we were together, I devoted myself completely to you, so you would never know I loved anybody else. If Bruce hadn't come back for me, I would have been content to remain your wife forever. Heather concluded with me, providing the ideal reaction to her deception. Several astonished looks emerged from the gallery. Carol appeared surprised, but quickly regained her calm. I attempted to smooth things over for him. I lied to him to keep him from losing face. Heather touched another button, and Carol came outside our home. Heather only grinned. Fortunately, your husband maintains good records. We have the dates. So you were in your sister's house in Covington on May 9th, 2019, December 26, 2018, August 16th, 2018, March 9th, 2018, and a number of other days leading up to your wedding. Carol responded sharply, yes. Heather selected another button, and a video of her with Bruce at hotels on those days emerged on the screens where there had previously been none. The reservation form and receipts clearly indicated their presence. Heather addressed the judge. They were collected pursuant to a court order from the Hamilton Sheriff's Court. I've linked it to the documents and records I delivered to your secretary and Ms. Johnston. Heather looked to Carol, who was dressed in white. Amazing, isn't it? Not a single bruise mark. It's as if the bruises never occurred. It appears that you are Miss Reese and Mr. Benning like those hotels and frequented them whenever you reportedly visited your sister. He did not save you. You were his brownies. Carol glanced fiercely at Heather. I tried not to smile. Laughter exploded behind me. Heather became more menacing as she pressed Carol. Now let's take a look at the financial fantasy you offered to the court. According to your agreement with Mr. Benson, you both agreed to donate a portion of your salaries to a joint account. You wanted to keep your financial freedom. But it isn't the whole story, is it? You intended to keep your income hidden from Mr. Benson so you might have a backup plan in case you decided to leave him. He was merely a tool for you to manipulate. You lied for years about being his wife. You have lied for years. You were a general nurse with a salary close to the minimum. The truth is that you were, as he puts it, a cheater. For Benning, you are far ahead in your job and earn about 4 times what you told Mr. Benson. You failed to increase your payments as agreed. You revealed your poverty when you desired a new car and requested Mr. to pay for the lease while you drove it on your secret, adulterous escapades with Mr. Benning. You had no moral qualms about paying for some of your experiences using your joint account with Mr. Benson. That is why the accounts you submitted to the court are fabricated. Heather tapped another button, displaying photographs of Carol's bank statements on the screen. They demonstrated huge savings. Her current account indicated large payments from her job, which she had not told me about. Poor nurse who did not want to be promoted. And you are actually the hospital's 3rd most senior nurse. Heather brought up the bonds. How do you explain how they ended up under your name, and what was found in your safe deposit box? Carol looked around, shocked. I could see her reflection in the monitor. I tried to convey utter indifference by not looking at her directly. Carol corrected herself. I was looking out for myself when he took charge, Heather continued. These are Miss Personal information and bond amount were confirmed as of that date. She gave them to the court clerk and Miss. Johnston was no longer smiling. Heather smiled warmly, but I knew she was about to make a delicious move. You want to get your wedding band back? After all, it's a family legacy and an unfaithful act. Wouldn't she expect to keep it? Is it for nostalgic reasons that you want to recall a decent, caring man rather than someone who would abandon you once his demands are met? Carol responded defiantly. I adored that ring. It meant the world to me, especially after he burnt my wedding gown. I want it returned. Heather tapped another button, and a photo of Mr. Bruce Benning and his fiancée, Carol Reese, at a hospital appointment 9 months before the end of our relationship showed on the screen. The photo depicted an engagement ring. Heather continued, the newspaper portrays the evening admirably. Mr. Benning relished showing off the magnificent, one-of-a-kind engagement ring he gave to his bride-to-be. She repeated the sentences with a harder tone. He handed it to her. Isn't it eerily identical to the one Mr. Benson inadvertently gave to someone pretending to be his fiancée? Wasn't it a charade, convincing the hospital that Benning was making a commitment? The hospital administrator stated that they like their doctors to be married because they believe that having families here helps them connect with the community. So it isn't about sentimental attachment or affection. Above all, it's about getting the job you want. A physician's wife. You need it to completely blind the hospital administrators. Heather's next remark astounded Carol. Benning only needs you for as long as he wants to be there. I had to stifle my laughter. I'm sure you've been crying about your wedding dress. Did you intend on wearing it when or if Benning marries you? Carol answered. No, but it sounded weak. We all knew she was crying. Heather touched another button, and Stephanie's voice emerged. She's invited him to your wedding. She hoped he'd demand it before she married you. Carol sobbed. Mr. Benson's main error was that he only saw you through the affection he had for you. He never saw the true you, the cruel and manipulative jerk. You couldn't simply walk away from such an honorable man and accept the loss. You. He would not have known about your indiscretions, financial trickery, or profound betrayal all those years ago. You should have delighted over his disgrace and death. You viewed Robert Benson as a gullible fool. You saw him as a part-time worker until your love became free and wealthy enough for you. Clearly, you envied his ability to love. So you two set out to ruin his life after you. Your ultimate cruelty was that you attempted to destroy his self-esteem and manhood so that he would never trust anyone else with his heart. Even that wasn't sufficient. You wanted him so corrupted that his reputation would be ruined. He would be unable to work. He would not have a decent life. Mr. Benson never exerted any control. The court may take a different view of the control you imposed on him over the years. You lived with him. You denied him children. You took his money. You took his love for granted. Heather finished. You and your lover conspired to bring down the man who loved you, provided for you, and catered to your every desire. Your lover asked you to marry him, a serial cheater. I'm curious if the position you want will be available once the trial is over. And, if so, how long will this last? Carol seemed taken aback by Heather's suggestion. Miss Johnston didn't ask any further questions as her sister and Benning prepared to leave the court. Heather asked the court officer to stop them. She was not finished with them yet. Carrie, her sister, moved slowly up to the podium. Heather was succinct. Do you admit to lying to the court and covering up your sister's adulterous relationship with Bruce Benning? The sister started to cry. Heather asked. Did you take photos of the alleged injuries? Carrie quietly responded, No. Heather finished. I will inform your church's leadership that you are a non-Christian. Carrie's eyes widened, and fear gripped her at once. Screw you, jerk, Heather called out to Stephanie next. Stephanie stood straight but tense. Heather started quietly. How long did you know about your affair? Stephanie responded. The affair was with Robert. Carol has always belonged to Bruce. Heather smiled. Why would you lie for her? Stephanie froze. I have never lied. I repeated what I had been told. Heather continued. Have you ever seen the bruises she says she has? Stephanie responded, No. She was so upset I believed her. Despite numerous questions, Stephanie refused to admit she was an unwitting fool and defended her friend. Heather was a surgeon. Stephanie had no way of concealing her lie moving forward. Finally, Heather inquired, Do you know how to tell the truth? How many boyfriends have you? Are you thinking about pulling the same trick on your husband? When does someone better come along? Stephanie was shocked. I adore my husband. I would not do that. Heather pressed a button, and a video appeared on the screen of Stephanie and her husband, Amy Grant, leaving the room to meet Carol and Bruce. Stephanie crouched on the counter before fainting. Amy yells from the gallery, "You goddamn jerk!" and walks away. I suppose Brian and Grant would soon discover what had happened. Heather addressed the sheriff directly. "Can I ask the court for leniency? If I call another witness before cross-examining Bruce Banning, his testimony will help the court understand what is going on." The sheriff agreed. Bill Banning later informed me that he appeared to have suffered a heart attack. When Heather finished speaking, Samantha Weissman, a woman I had never seen before, took her place at the podium. She was the Ideal Cosmetics commercial. She looked perfect. Heather smiled. "Miss Weissman, what do you do?" Samantha responded. "I am a creative who works in theater, film, and TV. I can create textural effects or use makeup to enhance the experience at most events. I can make you look like street artists who use chalk to create massive holes in the road or trains that emerge from walls." Heather continued. "Do you know Bruce Banning?" Samantha cautiously responded, "Yes. I met him while visiting Bristol. My son Alan was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor, and Mr. Banning operated on him. It was a success. That happened 8 years ago." Heather inquired, "How did Mr. Banning find out about your abilities?" Samantha responded clearly. "After the surgery, Alan's motor skills were temporarily impaired. I had to help him regain proper use of his arm and hand. I was playing with him with plasticine, sculpting his favorite monsters. When Mr. Banning arrived, we spoke, and he seemed fascinated by it." Heather asked, "Was it no further than that?" Samantha responded, "Yes. It was approaching Halloween, and he asked if I could dress him up for the party. He wanted to be an abusive spouse because his friends said he was so tense. He's never heard a joke. His reputation, he claimed, was undeserved. He would not tolerate a woman saying no to him, let alone asserting her superiority over him. It would reveal all that they were. I made him for 3 parties that year, and the bruises were slightly different colors. I have done it 3 more times since then, several years apart?" Heather asked. "Also, Mr. Banning, do you know anyone else in this court?" Samantha looked around and responded. "Carol and Samantha, I did their makeup for a few parties in Liverpool last year. They claimed their husbands would never have hit them, but they wanted to see how their friends would react." Heather pressed another button, displaying images of Carol and Samantha on the screen. They must have been Samantha's copies because they demonstrated the entire process. There were no visible marks on either of them before she began or after she finished. I believed her. I hit Carol. She's phenomenally talented. I almost jumped with joy when I realized Carol's photos were the same ones she had shown the court. Heather stammered. "So all of those photos show the work you did and no actual bruises," Samantha responded. "When they arrived, they were spotless. When they left, they appeared battered. Heather simply asked if you knew what your creations would be used for. To discredit and accuse their husbands of assault and bending to sue the women who turned down his advances?" Samantha was shocked. "I would never do something like that. If I had known, I would have contacted them and offered to reveal the truth for them." Heather responded, "Thank you, Miss." Johnston asked no questions. She appeared shocked and defeated, and the sheriff hummed as if to express his relief that the case had been closed. But Heather wanted a piece of flesh while Banning was testifying. 2 men entered the courtroom. They focused solely on him. Banning did not appear happy at all. I stared at him. I wanted to see Heather grill and dissect him. My cruel smile, which I had practiced for this occasion, revealed how much I was looking forward to it. Heather began. "Mr. Banning, you had an extramarital affair with Miss. Did you know Reese was previously married to Mr. Benson?" The arrogant Banning responded, "No, I only came to her rescue." Heather picked through all of his lies, and his arrogance made me shudder. He loved himself at all times. He tried to brag about his accomplishments when Heather's noose, metaphorically speaking, slipped around his neck. It opened the trapdoor. Heather smiled. "So you claim to have gotten intimate with Miss yesterday." Reese had only recently recovered from an assault by her husband. But today, I presented the court with decades of evidence of you spending time together in hotels for multi-day meetings. She laughed when you tried to make love to her. Banning angrily replied, "No." "We've only recently become intimate," Heather continued. "Many hotel guests complained about the noise from your room. Your mouth screamed as you exchanged intimate moments. Are your hotel neighbors lying? Benning stared at Heather as she listed the numerous complaints. Heather smiled as she continued. There are additional complaints about your behavior? Heather started to wrap up. You lie to conceal your affair with a married woman. You deceive your employers by claiming that everything we just witnessed is fiction. Are you a real surgeon, or is this another scam? Benning became angry. I am a surgeon, one of the best. Heather laughed. You may be a talented surgeon, but as a human being, you are despicable. Heather pressed a button and started scrolling through pictures of Denning's marital bad attitude. She stopped and let people read the accompanying letters, which showed how he had tricked forecourts into granting him substantial monetary settlements against women such as Betsy, with whom he had befriended. Court records show they all denied assaulting him from his own records. It appears that he devised his plans in retaliation for them having the audacity to reject his advances. It was through these photos that he had convinced the sheriff, despite all other evidence, that the women had not assaulted him. Heather questioned him about the photos. He couldn't answer some of the incriminating statements. She ripped the covers off of him as she recounted his mistreatment of these women. Your colleagues were right about you, weren't they? You cannot see a woman as an equal capable of refusing your pathetic advances. Those who refused and had property you persecuted. You lied in court. You are simply a small man in every sense of the word. His indignant remark didn't go unnoticed by the sheriff, and Heather nearly laughed when he called her a bloody witch. His arrogance was slipping away. The understanding of what awaited him was slowly dawning after tearing him to shreds over women. She continued on to the main course. Heather showed records of his and Carol's encounters, as well as their written and email correspondence. He disputed that they were conversing at the time Heather mentioned when she displayed the comprehensive plot to accuse me with attacking Carol. A few sobs broke in the galley. Benning had a clear strategy on how they would damage me and my life. Benning tried to dismiss it, claiming that it was merely lovers' stories, a distraction, and they'd never do that. Heather stated that this was exactly what you were doing. You played his parents. You played his boss. You fooled Miss Johnston to present it before this particular court. She continued to create more documents. She turned to face Benning. You weren't going to stop there, right? You were already planning another scheme to get the money, right? Benning denied it, but was increasingly anxious. He looked at both men and Carol. Heather hesitated, as one does before heading to dessert. Heather pressed a few further buttons. The audience gave a big sigh. When the screen appeared with his plan to sue her for all of her money, it sounded like Carol's voice when he was sick of her. Someone similar to her was sobbing on the TV. Was Benning planning to marry Carol to secure his position as head neurosurgeon in 3 or 4 years? He would learn new tactics that would allow him to move to the United States and generate millions of dollars. Carol will be dumped since he is fed up with her. He will ensure that she commits adultery, after which he will receive everything. I could definitely hear Carol sobbing as her dream was ruined. Her reputation would never be rebuilt. Heather led on. You lied in this courtroom, lied in other courts to receive a cash award. I believe you will find that the courts will not be kind to you. Sheriff Griffiths of Hamilton has issued a warrant for your arrest. These cops are here to carry it out on behalf of your victims. I secured a court order to freeze all of your assets, which was implemented this morning. I'm sure Miss Reese now realizes the difference between what she so readily discarded and a con man who will go to any length to swindle naive ladies in order to compensate for his inadequacy. The officers led the stunned, bent away. Heather then called me to testify. Heather told me about my marriage and how I was absolutely unprepared. She went into detail about what had happened earlier that evening. I admitted to emptying my bladder because of him and then threw it away. I expressed my dismay and horror at what had occurred. This was exacerbated by the fact that they had falsely accused me of abuse. I had lost my parents, my work, and numerous friends. I was still unemployed since no one wanted me, despite the fact that I was acknowledged as a very good engineer. I had lost everything I treasured, and I didn't. The sheriff stated that he would make a decision on the partition of property the next day and concluded with Mr. Benson. You have been completely vindicated and have averted a major miscarriage of justice. You are the decent, honest, and compassionate individual that your attorney mentioned in the beginning. You deserve to meet someone who is similar to you and have a successful future. He finished abruptly. Those who have lied. I'll deal with it tomorrow in my courtroom. Jim embraced Heather. He hugged me. Bill, Sandra, and the others embraced me. I noticed my mother crying. She had lost both her daughter and son. Following Dan's words, her visits to her grandkids had significantly diminished. The sheriff annulled the marriage the next day and awarded me my part in accordance with the prenuptial agreement. He also ordered her to pay the sum she was supposed to contribute to the joint account, as well as the payments she made from it for her adulterous connection, the worth of her car, which she could easily afford. The bonds were valued £125,000, so he gave me £112,500. He then gave her maintenance of £675 per month until I found a job with a salary equivalent to what I had lost as a result of her falsehoods. Heather's team added all of the data, which were included in the paperwork she provided to the court. Carol resembled her old self. Samantha was unlikely to be able to hide her tears. Carol was clearly told by the sheriff that if she won, he was seriously considering putting her in jail for lying in his court, and the truth eventually came out. She would be imprisoned for at least several years. He found her £5,000 and awarded her a 3-month suspended prison sentence. He also ordered her to pay my legal fees in full within 1 month. Alternatively, the suspended sentence would be enforced. Carrie and Samantha were each fined £1,000 to be paid within 30 days. Spending appeared before Hamilton Sheriff Court and later explained his reasons to Sheriff Griffiths over a cup of coffee. Heather, Jim, and I discussed what we should do next now that Heather had decided to go to the General Medical Council and try to have Benning removed off the medical registration. While we were conversing, Jim received a call from Hamilton Court. Benning was brought into custody. Sheriff Griffiths made it clear to his defense that the next time he appears in court, he wants all of the money he took from those 4 women deposited in the court account. Alternatively, he might face a significant prison sentence. In addition, he can request full payment of court fees and any other justified expenses spent as a result of his false allegations against those women. Even with these payments, he faced a lengthy prison sentence. Heather was also planning to file an appeal with the General Board of Nursing, citing Carol's reprehensible behavior in such a prominent position. She understood she was likely to fail because, unlike Benning, she had not taken control of her situation. However, with this complaint in hand, companies would think twice about hiring her, and I would be looking for work because I didn't want anything to do with Carol. Heather urged me to put up with child support until I got work. Jim astonished me by quietly saying, "Stay with Sandra for a while. Somehow she appears to like you. When I talk to her, she appears friendly and compassionate. Maybe you can help each other because she stated that she cannot be what you want, whatever that means. Given what you've gone through, I'll say it once. Consult a counselor. Despite your pleasant demeanor, you are in a great deal of discomfort. You are not deceiving us. A counselor will assist you in discovering your true self. Live life and find happiness. You deserve it." Heather and I have seen a lot over the years, but there are books and movies that could be made about your experience. You're a good, respectable, honorable man. Help me get them back and screw them up even more by making sure they have a decent life after we parted ways. Heather's final words had me laughing. If you believe the sheriff let her off easily without putting her in jail. He did not. My bill would be approximately £24,000. Your rate would be significantly reduced for you. I've been so helpful to Betsy, but she will never know. Dan came by to visit me after work. He was quite pleased for me. He appeared exhausted, as the new infant had not slept much. They chose to have a 3rd child because he wanted a son. So he was born. Our parents had not seen him yet. He offered me a job working the night shift. I refused. I have very little experience in this industry. He wrapped his arm around me and whispered, "You'll find the right person. You will have the family you want, at least till the first contaminated diaper." He laughed and went away. Sandra, Josie, Michaela, Gordon, Bill, and a few more joined me later for a celebration drink. It was very enjoyable to have fun. Josie shocked me by inviting me to dance. She grinned and pulled me closer. "Take a chance, Sandra. She has always cared about you. You'll complement each other well. If not, Michaela or I will snag you." She giggled and attempted to waddle away as if I had trod on her foot. Sandra was the last to depart, Robert. I promised that if you needed anything, I would help you. I still meant it. I wish I were the lady you needed. Then Michaela. Josie and the others would have been delighted to become close friends with you, or more. You're too fine a man to be alone. I witnessed how you acted when others brought their children to work. You're going to be an excellent father. Do whatever you have to do to find love. Sandra, I believe we can support each other. I was too young. I didn't know myself, or how women could support you. You were very dear to me. You were my first love, a crush. Jim suggested I see a counselor to help me find myself. Maybe we'll both visit a counselor and see what happens. If he can assist us both, I have a void. I do not know who I am. Sandra smiled. Robert, if we do this, it's only because I hope to be with you as a partner and mother in the future. You deserve it. She exhaled. Let us try to see a counselor. 2 days later, the local newspaper appeared, and I was on the first page. The article was really comprehensive, describing how they were attempting to set me up. No one doubted that I was a good guy. Nobody in the online publication's comments section supported her. Some of the comments about what would happen to her terrified me. About 8 weeks later, Heather sent me an email including copies of her letters to the General Medical Council, the General Board of Nursing, and the leadership of the Carey Evangelical Church. Heather did not disregard Benning's activities, which added to the dishonor of his profession. She described his public revelations and lying in court. She insisted that his registration be suspended immediately. It helped that by his third court appearance, despite repaying the money, he had scammed these women of nearly £250,000. Sheriff Griffiths jailed him for 5 years. Heather provided Samantha Wiseman's images of him and her evidence to the fiscal prosecutor, who ensured that his defense received copies before they left court on the first day of his plea. Benning pleaded guilty at the first opportunity, therefore he was eligible to a 33% sentence reduction. Sheriff Griffiths cited a previous ruling upheld by the Court of Appeal, claiming that despite being constrained to a 5-year sentence because he believed the High Court would have jailed Benning for 7.5 years with the reduction, he could impose that period. He pondered sending Benning to the High Court, where a harsher sentence could be issued, which he believed was quite possible. However, considering the COVID-related backlog, he thought it was best. In other words, you appeal at your own peril. Benning, a top medical expert, spoke on the record, and numerous major publications covered the tale. The Sunday editions crucified him. I was approached but declined to respond, stating that I was still too far removed from her treachery to make any statements. Heather's letter to the Evangelical Church leadership questioned Carey's competence for her position and the likelihood of further advancement. She noted that Carey had misled under oath by taking up a Bible. It would be difficult to see how her activities justified her continuous breach of a commandment required by this church in order to maintain her position in the Evangelical Church's hierarchy. I doubted her marriage would last. Her spouse was very ardent about God at the golf club. Brian and Stephanie had broken up Amy and Grant. Sarah and Mark were having issues since she was so close to the other three that he had severe reservations about her. My kicks were at least 15 yards longer when I felt the ball belonged to one of the benches. I didn't care about Carol. She rolled me to the brink of despair, only to discover that her knight in rusted armor rolled her even further. Karma is a jerk. Chapter 2. Sandra and I have been visiting 2 psychologists for over 3 months now. It has been challenging. We have benefited each other. At the very least, she helped me. Sharon assists Sandra. I accompany her, but only for specific reasons. Sandra claimed her mother was not very polite to her, more like very awful. I used to date Sarah. Sandra would hug me whenever I cried. When we talked about my feelings about Carol and our marriage, I was perplexed. Sarah got it out of me. She tore down the wall I had built to keep my emotions under control. I despised her for alleviating that pain. She revealed my sense of loss and desire to understand what I had done wrong. She convinced me that betrayal was not the worst part. It was the way she was prepared to destroy me. That shattered my world. Carol, I didn't know this. I couldn't recognize myself anymore. Sarah informed me that I had done nothing wrong. I turned my rage on myself because I couldn't find answers. If I could write it all down and see it in black and white like an engineering puzzle, I'd realize it was the work of two conniving bastards. It was not my fault. I had no part in what they did. I was the good guy. Everyone was talking about something. Sandra backed Sharon on this issue, and it is because of her that I wrote this article. She was very persuasive, overcoming all of my reasons for not doing it. Finally, she promised to reward me if I completed the task. I read the entire thing several times and can see that it was not my fault. My friends had no reason to be suspicious of Carol's behavior toward everyone. We had the perfect marriage. We rarely fought. I may have been gullible in believing she loved me, but there was nothing I could do to stop what they had planned and executed. I'm going to have to work on accepting that. I know I'm ruining their lives even more than they did mine. I called Sandra and told her I was done. She said she'd be there shortly. I'm not sure what the reward will be. She's an excellent baker who teased me with her scones. I enjoy scones. We spend a lot of time cuddling together, whether it's at the movies or her house. We had physical time available. The conversations we had were excellent. We share so many interests, and some of them are simply not interesting to each other. But we are glad we do. For example, she doesn't understand the purpose of golf. She believes a good walk has been ruined. I had a talk with Sharon a few weeks ago. Sandra expressed a desire to have close relationships with her children. Sharon, as demonstrated in our last session, is assisting her, so perhaps they have a future together. There was a knock on the door, and it opened. Sandra was there. She was quite nervous. She entered, and I offered to take her coat. She glanced at me with the oddest expression I'd ever seen on her face. She curled her lips as she did in difficult situations, and appeared afraid. Me. She sighed hard, shrugged her shoulders, and slowly removed her coat. She stared at me. I've been following Sharon's advice to prepare, but I'm afraid. I led her into the living room and sat down beside her. Sandra, you do not need to do this, Robert. I want to. This is the initial stage in which I aim to provide something extra for you. What was I supposed to do? Yes, we got on with it. 2 weeks later, everything had changed again. I was quite thrilled. I found a job with a competitor of Ducharme that paid me more than they did. Neil Davidson seemed like a kind person when he interviewed me. It confirmed everything I'd heard about him. He had his own troubles, so he understood what I was going through. That didn't stop him from thoroughly assessing my engineering abilities. Sandra and I spent most of our evenings together. Last weekend, for example, I took her on a roller coaster in Staffordshire. This was her first time. She screamed all over the place, and she enjoyed it. I rented a room with twin beds. Sandra walked in, looking contemplative. She had 2 appointments with Sharon this week. I took her up in my arms and danced because I was overjoyed to have a job and, more importantly, her in my life. I reiterated this to her several times. I danced with her. That following day, I proposed marriage to her. We clinked our glasses and told the future, we'll have time to talk about what we want. But do you think we should think about anything right now? I looked around. Where will we live? You may not want to live here because of his background. Am I anywhere with you? Sandra laughed. I don't see any cause to move. The new dwellings resemble small rabbit holes. I used to accompany you when you visited your grandparents. You could sense that their love made this area exceptional. We are going to be alike. There are large rooms with plenty of space and 4 bedrooms. We could add another bathroom. I would tweak some of the color schemes, but that's it. The garden is large enough for children to play securely. We can also consider planting vegetables, herbs, and fruit. I nodded. How about you? Are you planning the ideal wedding? Sandra seems astonished. I never imagined having a wedding. My wedding would be small, as it would just include my mother, sister, and her family. I have 4 or 5 really close friends, 2 of whom will pretend to be upset that I snatched you from them. You have buddies like Bill and Gordon, your brother and his family. You never speak about your parents, and I can understand how you felt betrayed by them. I guess I'm worried that our children will not have grandparents to spoil them. My father died early, and my mother's health is not good. She was an excellent mother. She will be an excellent grandmother. I said quietly, it will be your decision, and I will support it either way. I will think about it. Thank you for taking the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this essay, please like it and subscribe if you have not already. If you have a tale to share about your or someone else's circumstance, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.